and welcome to the second episode of OAuth in the wild. Oh my god, this is gonna be wild. Just a second to go get the first slide. There we go. And you should not be able to see the slides, right? Just one more tweak, and we're good to go. Right. So, this is the second episode of the discussion about OAuth, hosted by Pentalog, in which I am so pleased to be part and tell you more about what happens when you put OAuth in a wild web. So I'd like to start a bit with the super basics, like 5 minutes of introduction. I will then recap a bit what happened last time, showing you one or two pictures from the last presentation for the first episode. And then we'll move on to understand in detail the protocol, the OAuth interaction that happens under the hood every time we authorize a request or we log in. And after that, I would really love to be able to analyze with you one or two attacks or threats in OAuth, just to understand how we think about security threats. There are many, and I will point you to the documents at the end that highlight different vulnerabilities in OAuth if it's misconfigured. So what is OAuth? Just double check. Yes. OAuth, the open authorization, is a standard for access delegation. So you can delegate access to another application. You could let another application access your data. Commonly used as a way for internet users to grant websites or applications access to their information on other websites. So the mobile app can have access something on my behalf on some server that I have data on, right? But without giving them the passwords. And there is this terrible nightmare of any security analyst in which you have an application. This never happened, just to be clear, never ever happened this. But you imagine an application, some website, that wants to get some data in the name of the user from mail, Google, for example. And to get that information, this is madness, this never happened. But it would offer to the users a form in which it will require the user to enter the user and password for Gmail. This is insane. This never happened. And then it will use that user password in turn to fetch and to do stuff in your name in the resource server at mailgoogle.com. That never happened, right? It's a terrible thing because, of course, while your password in plain text transits this system, it's yet a no-go, of course. So then OAuth basically involves tokens, like we saw last time, to be issued to clients, applications. And those tokens can act as keys to open different doors, to access different resources or do different actions in the name of the users. Good. So then the third-party app, the client, would use this access token to access the protected resources hosted by any server it wants. So it can read your emails if you granted access to that application. Now, the actors involved in OAuth is the human over here, resource owner, is the client, the application that wants to act on your behalf or do stuff for that user. The authorization server, last time we talked about Keycloak, but it can be a lot of stuff here, like OAuth, it can be a lot of servers, like Azure, a lot of servers, which gives the client, the application, a token in the name of the user. And with that token, the client can open any door, can call other services around, can access Twitter if you authorize with Twitter, can log in you into some obscure application using your Google credential. You're using the token, your token obtained from the authorization server. Now, this idea to basically separate the login part from the calls to other servers is not new. OAuth didn't brought this idea. This idea came, as far as I know, initially introduced on a large scale by SAML in 2005 by their famous WebSSO. And the same thing kind of happened. I mean, the sense that there was a browser And the browser, when trying to access some website, we got redirected back to some identity provider, like the authorization server in OAuth, if you want to draw a parallel. And then this identity provider would log in the user, provide user password. The user would log in, and then it will get back some XML, some set of claims that it would be redirected back to the application that you came from. The application would take the claim and validate, just like it would validate the token. So if you draw a parallel, the claims in a WebSSO, in SAML, are equivalent to a token in OAuth, in a sense. But SAML had some weaknesses. Had some weaknesses. The fact that they only worked in browsers. So you see, there is this browser thing in here that has to be there. And the modern world today involves more than browsers, involves single page applications without any backend. We'll talk about that briefly today. We'll talk about, involve mobile applications, not browsers. SAML doesn't work for mobile apps. It's not meant for that. And TV or devices in your house. SAML doesn't support that. So now we need, OAuth came to this gap, to fill the gap, and basically allow any application out there to do stuff in your behalf in different systems, right? So this is the age of OAuth. What you see in front of you here is a so-called social login, in which the user tries to log in to Bike to Workday. It's this website, and Bike to Workday. They had this button, login with Facebook. You click the button. I'm sure all of you use this button. Login with Google, login with Facebook, login with GitHub. You click that button, and the browser got redirected into here, into the Facebook site. And Facebook displays you this window asking you, hey, you're trying to log in with Facebook. To who? To this website, to this client application. So OAuth would delegate the authorization, basically finding out what you can do, and to Facebook. Bike to Work would delegate Facebook to identify who you are in this sense. And then when in this screen, Facebook asks you, is it okay if I share with Bike to Workday your public profile and email address? And if you agree to that, then if you say continue as math, what happens next is that this Facebook.com issues a token. Technically, there will be two tokens. It will be the access token and the OpenID carrying the details about you. And those tokens will get back to the Bike to Workday. Right? Now, those tokens will be emitted in your name because you were logged in. You had a session with Facebook. You were already logged in with Facebook. And then Facebook just is used to authorize you to, is used to press you to confirm your identity. All right? And that allows you to basically decouple the authentication. So Facebook authorization server, this one here, this OAuth endpoint, is identifying who you are, issuing you a token, redirecting you back to where you came from, to Bike to Work, and then Bike to Work with the token can do stuff. What stuff? In the token, it will find out your email, your name, basically authorizing, giving you access to Bike to Work, because then Bike to Work knows who you are. Hey, you can enter. There is a gray area in here if you dive more in. The difference between authentication and authorization. OAuth technically is an authorization framework, which grants access to different endpoints and actions. But it's when you play it on to do social login like this, it's always bundled together with another thing called OpenID. And that OpenID Connect will carry a token identifying who you are. That complements basically OAuth with carrying identity data. In social login, this happens. This is how information about you gets shared. Now, another keyword in OAuth is scopes. Scopes here mean in a wild web environment means what would the client application know about you? What do you want to share? What permissions do? What actions? They had another example later on here. This is more dramatic. In this case, you are logging in to Twitter with Facebook. You are logging in with Facebook to Twitter. And then if you do that, Facebook will grant access to read tweets, post tweets in your name. Do you trust the Facebook client application to post tweets for you. This is not just sharing information. This is the granting actions. Facebook application can do stuff in your name, posting in your timeline on Twitter. If you click authorize application, these are scopes. These are scopes, right? And it's very, look, I will do a social login right now for you. I will use this obscure website that I used to find a babysitter for my child. And it's a good example of a, anyone can do it, even helpers. What the heck is, who the heck is this site? I don't care. I will just disconnect and log in again. If I log in again, I'll have this button over here. Honestly, if I see a website that doesn't have such a button, I will think twice if I want to use that website. I mean, like, who the heck doesn't do that today? Why would I ever want to create a password? Come on, those days are gone. Log in with Facebook or log in with Google. So I will click here. If I click here, okay, this already logged me in. Let me try to log out. Oops, to log out, and then kill this. Right? Let's try again. The first time you log in, it will. Oh, I know what I have to do. I will show you in a second. Helpers. All right. If I authenticate here with Google, I got in. Why? Because you see, Google. Where is that? Apps, access your account. There is a list somewhere you can find that of the applications that have access to your Google. So Google wouldn't ask me again if I want to share my name and email with this application because I already granted access. So let me show you. In this list here, there is this helpers that I can remove access for. Remove access. If I do that, if I go again here and I log out and I log in again, here. This with Google, please. Here, Google. Now you see this screen, and then I'm sure you've seen it hundreds of times. This screen this is Romanian. I'm sorry, but it says that it will share your name, your email address, your language preferences, and your image or your profile image to who? To helper.com. So this is basically asking you about scopes, but no one reads this, right? Be very careful about this thing here. There can be weird, wild things going on here, like hey, sending emails in your name. Although Google will kind of warn you about that if an application requires such permissions in your name. But here, these are the scopes that the helpers asked Google to provide in your name. And if you click that, you're in. This is social login going on here. Right, and we'll dissect what happened on the network level in a moment. But for now, just to keep on the introduction a bit, OAuth technically is this delegating framework for APIs that will that enables us to get some information about the user from our website, and then with that pass it to another website. And not only data, but even actions, like we saw in this slide. Like some application can be granted access to do stuff in your name in another resource server, in another API. Good. Now, also from the concept of OAuth, and we'll use this information in a moment, is the kind of clients are split in two types. There are public clients. A public client is the one that cannot keep a secret. For example, if you put a password in the code of a JavaScript application on the internet, anyone can read it. You can just go there and do F12 and scan the code for F12, and there you go. Scan the stuff to find that variable and read the password. It's not safe to keep secrets. Public clients can't keep secrets. Confidential clients like servers, they can keep safely a secret away from the hackers. You can't. I mean, you need to hack the server to get the secret, right? Right. Now, a recap of what we did last time. It was a really, really wild discussion over there with this horrible picture. And if you want to know the details, watch the previous episode. Quick recap. The browser wants to access some application, and the browser was not authenticated, that didn't have a session yet with this application. Imagine this is helper.raw that you just saw. And this would redirect me to Google in my case. Last time was Keycloak. And this redirection here asks me to, if I weren't logged in with Google, I would have to enter my user password on Google, which I didn't enter for the past 2 years, but anyway. And then I will be redirected back here with a code, with an authorization code, which the application will exchange on a back channel, invisibly behind the curtains, not through redirects going through browser, and we'll exchange this code over here with an access token. And the access token is that key that I told you that opens all the doors. That access token over here, access token can be then used by the application to both confirm the identity of the user and call others. Last time we were just confirming the identity of the user, but in a wild web scenario, this can be used by helpers to access stuff that I have on another. I have a question from Mihai already, tough one, related to the picture I dropped in front of you with the types of clients. Question goes like, why is a smart TV confidential and the browser is configured, mobile browser, a browser is configured to be public, is considered to be public? Well, first of all, you can emulate the browser running on a mobile. And you can then again, F12, right? There you go. You can emulate, you can pretend that's Chromium basically. But maybe a better question is the difference, why is a mobile app considered to be public? There are ways in which you can keep secrets on mobiles, indeed, which will turn a mobile app into a confidential one. On the other hand, it's hard for me to imagine a hacker coming to your home and hacking into your TV, to plugging your USB cable to enter your TV in debug mode and find the secret in the source code in there. It's hard to believe. It's a device in your home. Although they can be hacked just like a server. The phone. A mobile app indeed can be made confidential if you rely on an infrastructure that provides you secrets. Look, let's take the debate at the end, this one, but please fire ideas. Thank you, because I have a lot to share and I won't have the time if I fall into this here. So what we just saw here is the last episode, right? Let's now and also from the last time there are three types of code, three types of things that a client app can get during your auto hash. There is the authorization code, which is the result of you logging in. We will see it again today. There is a token that opens the door, and the refresh token that can be used to get more access tokens later when the first one expires. So like yesterday we spent a lot of time on this picture, and today we will spend a lot of time on this picture. I should put the professionals to do that for me, please. My goal is to get this in your brain if possible today. Right, but first of all, should I already? Yeah, let's start reading this. But please, because it's madness, follow my highlight here. It's the same idea it's the same basic design, the same idea, like yes, the same participants like the last time. We have the client application, we have the authorization server, we have the browser. The fact that the browser is here and the client app is here means that the client app is a backend application. The fact that you see back channel in here, this is what I want to claim here, that the client application is a server-side application that is able to communicate with the authorization server in a secret way by using this arrow over here. Means this. Okay. Now, let's start. The first, there are roughly three payloads to study. Three we care of. The client app. The first, if I want to relate with what we did last time, let's do that. I think it's fun if you watch both episodes. It's useful. The first, the three arrows are like this. The first arrow that is critical is the redirect from the application from the client to the authorization server. The next arrow that is critical is this, carrying back the code to you. And the third arrow is this exchange, which is your request to the authorization server to get the tokens. These are the three arrows that we will study today in detail to understand what goes on in each of them. Let's see, following this request, there will be another response bringing the tokens back to the client app, but that's not interesting in practice. It's just bringing the tokens. So here, let's start with, and we have, you see already attacks going on a different level. Let's see how we proceed. And my dream today would be to be able to mark on this, see how, where is that in the PowerPoint? Can't I write on the screen, on the PowerPoint? Okay, there. Right. I can mark stuff down. Like let's try like this, exactly. So my goal would be to make you understand every single piece of this of the payload in here. So let's start small. Let's start very, very basic first. The client app wants to redirect the browser. It's the first time you access the application and you get redirected to the authorization server. So I'm talking about this request now first, which is the authorization request. What happens in there? Your browser is instructed to fire a get to, for example, accounts google.com, and that request will carry the response type code, which means the type of flow, the type of the grant type that you want, the type of workflow that you want to take to get the token. I will explain at the end. There are 5 or 6 types of grants in there. What we look at here is the authorization code grant, the stuff that we discussed last time, and we will start today again with that, it being like the golden standard. Client ID is the unique identifier of this system, of this application. And it's very important that this client ID and the redirect URI, both of these two things, are registered beforehand with, there is this registration phase over here that happens during which the client would create basically an account to Google, would register as a client of the authorization from Google, basically. In which phase you will have to provide the client ID and the redirect URI. This has to go on the authorization server. The name of your application and your redirect URI. And this will be found again in the request that you fire. Okay, I will show you at the end in debugger in Chrome the same information. This tells the Google, technically, we will mention Google as an authorization server. It tells you who wants to authorize the user. Good. And where should the browser be redirected back after the authorization is completed? After the login, after the token is generated. Where should I send the, not the token, sorry, in this case, the code. Where should I send the code? I asked for a code. Where should I send the code? Send it to this URL. And please notice that this redirect URL here will be matched in here. This is where the response will go back to my app or the hash callback. It's the same string. So after issuing the code, authorization server will redirect back the browser with redirect to the URL I requested here. Right. Giving the code back to the application. Okay. First attack. One of the first in the list of all the threats is that it's called open redirect. Imagine a bad application. Imagine you receive an email telling you that you won a phishing email. You won a new workstation. You won a MacBook M2 Pro Max 64 gigabytes. You just click here and log in the corporate login to redeem it. You click on the link, you get to a phishing login site. But you see what happened? An attacker sneaked you a URL. This is all the URL, you see? All of this madness, it's the URL. Sneaked you this URL. All of this is the URL, which contains another redirect URI. Not getting you back to the URL of the application, not getting you back to the real client, getting you back to a hacked to a URL under the control of the attacker. So if you click that link and if you log in, when you will be redirected back, the code will reach the attacker. They will steal your code. And then they will need one more attack to be able to redeem that code for an access token. It's still not done. They still have to hack this path. They got the code though. So one of the first attacks is the authorization server not matching precisely or incorrectly matching the redirect URI in the authorization request. Fun example, a real life example. Where are you? Injection. PayPal, 2016. The authorization server just checked that the redirect URL started with company.com. So when you registered as a third party, you had to provide this URL, the redirect URL. And anything that started with company.com was a good redirect URI. And then, you know what the attacker did? He sent you to this host. It starts with company.com, but it's on the control of the attacker. They just did starts with. That's bad. Do you want to do the same stupid thing in my case, in Keycloak? Look, it's so easy. It's so I can do this. This is the first stupid mistake you can do. It's famous for being so clients. It's so easy to do. App here, redirect URI. You're dead. In this moment, you're dead. I don't think you can save this. Save. You can, but it's so bad, so bad. Then by sniffing, an attacker can just grab your code very easy. You will just basically Keycloak, the authorization server would redirect back the authorization request with the code anywhere where that request tells, even to a hacked site. That's the first way to misconfigure OAuth hash. Okay, what happens next? Next comes the scopes. In the Wild Web scenario, like Google, like social again, this is where you will ask. In this case, we can imagine we ask the permission to send mails in my name and to not insert this, but you can imagine like I want the names. Let's intercept already the helper's authorization request. All right. So let's go to helpers. Good. I will log out. Deconnect. F12. Network. Clear, authenticate, clear, good, clear again, and then log with Google, go. So what happens at the beginning of the flow here, login, you can see here I requested this resource, and then I got 302 redirected to account Google. Over here, if you look, scope equal OpenID, email, profile. I'm asked the email and my public information. This is what was displayed just at the beginning, and Google asked me, hey, do you agree to share this information with helpers? This is a scope that comes after. Right? You also see the response type code here in the directory. Getting the browser back to helpers after the successful authorization. Right? So this is the scope part. State. State is a random number added by the client to the initial request, which has to match, which is copied as it is in the response by the authorization server. The reason for this token is cross-site request forgery protection. This is pretty hard to understand, so I will leave it for the end if we have time. It's pretty hard to understand. In very, very brief, in brutal way to speak, is it would allow the attacker to force the victim to authenticate as the attacker. It can push the attack. It's strange. Usually the attacker wants to steal the session, to log in as the victim. No, this time the attacker pushes his session to the... There is a slide, and I will show the slides with you, but where do I get all this information from? There is this wonderful resource for best practices about OAuth hash. It's called OAuth hash current best practices. Very good resource. I'll put the link in the chat. It will be in the end in the slides also. Very good resource in which talks about all of these things in more detail. Insufficient redirect URI validation and cross-site request forgery that we just mentioned just now. CRS cross-site request forgery with the it's just a number. That thing is just a number which is copied by the authorization server back in the response to ensure that technically you can't just intercept this request and then ship it to someone else to continue it in your name. It's really tricky, this one. You could record this, then send the link to in a phishing email to the victim that will then continue the flow as the no, I'm wrong. No, let's not rush. If I have time at the end, we will analyze more. Then come these two things, which is called Pixie, which I will keep for the end. So making abstraction, ignoring this for a second, these are like optional and added later. For an authorization code flow, these are options really. You do that, you get the authorization response. What happens in there? Well, the code is coming back from the authorization server, and the state we just mentioned goes back into the application in the URI that has to match what was registered at the beginning, right? Beforehand, right? In between that, the user has to enter the credentials if he didn't have a session already, but since I have my session with Google for the past 2 years, I didn't have to enter any password. And I would consent to share my email and personal information with the helpers.com. And then the code comes back to the client app. You say, I'm done. I'm done. What happens next? Well, the client app will have to push this code in a post. This is the third and last interesting request to study. And that will be a post done from server to server on the back channel, invisible from the browser, putting the code in the request, and then again repeating the client ID and redirect API. URI. This has to move. This has to be repeated there also to identify who you are. Then comes the client secret, which makes the difference between public clients and confidential clients. A client secret is kept in a backend system. This is a recommended best practice to have a backend system for every time you want to do an OAuth hash, or at least in a web environment, you want a backend system. And that backend system would keep the secret, and it will play the secret to the authorization server. Basically, what's the purpose of this secret? What could happen if this weren't here? But using an attack like I mentioned before with open redirect, like doing redirect to some other hosts, the attacker could get a hold of your code and could then exchange the code back for a token without any problem. But now this client secret in here stops the attacker from doing that, because it will have to somehow hack into the client application server to get the secret from there. It doesn't have this information. Without this, in an authorization code flow, the authorization server says, who the heck are you? Give me the password, give me the secret. So the secret has to be established beforehand between the authorization server and the client app. Relating to what I have in here, there is this credential thing in Keycloak which says, hey, secret. And this secret has to be repeated in the client application that I have. I can put it on the screen here. The secret has to be here. TFA. This secret has to be there because this is used for the back channel communication. If a certain client cannot keep this secret, right? What kind of you can't put this in a JavaScript file and put it in the browser, because anyone can read it, right? In a wild web, right? So the client secret is supposed to be kept on a backend system or in some way secure, so that the hacker can't steal it. How can we make it work with a flow initiated from a SSH session that runs somewhere on a remote server? More details, please. Initiated from a SSH session. So you log in with SSH. It's a command line tool. There are no browser in that game, I assume. More details. Paragraphs. Explain with bullets what is the flow. It's too short. So this token request over here does that and then says, hey, I need an authorization code. Good. This has to match, in this case, this part over here. Good. Client ID, redirect to. The server wouldn't redirect you anywhere. You just have to repeat this again. So this is a token request. You have the code from here. You pass it along to the authorization server, and the response is boring. We'll just give you the access token and the ID token, the OpenID token that contains who you are, like your profile photo, your email address. This is how helpers found out about my email, for example. And also the refresh token that you can use to get more access tokens once this expires. Once you get the access token, what's left is again boring. You can just use it, in the authorization header to issue a request to any server you want in the user's name. So you can basically, I don't know, if you granted Facebook access to post in your name on Twitter, this is Facebook posting on Twitter in your name using the access token it retrieved for you from the Twitter authorization server. I hope this makes sense. Okay, wait. So again, client ID redirectory, authorization server redirects you back. State to protect against cross-site request forgery. We get it, I hope. And there are more attacks here that I want to mention. Let's start with the easiest, browser history. What would that mean? Well, once these are ways, all of these here are ways to lose the code, basically, or to manipulate the code somehow. Browser history means that this redirecting here, going back to the client, goes through the browser, you see? And if the browser is a bit old and doesn't know about all the security updates and patches, and if it's an old website, it might actually be so stupid as to keep this URL in the browser history. Like imagine an internet cafe. That's it, internet cafe. So you forgot your laptop back home, you don't have a mobile phone. Who the hell, what are you? You are in Nigeria and you want to send an email back. You go to an internet cafe, you log in with Google, and they use Internet Explorer 7. Just throwing some numbers. That browser might have in the history the URL that was redirected back from the authorization server. And then after you comes another guy who picks this from the history, and then it gets your authorization code. If that guy tries to play the code back to authorization server to get a token, with the code itself, you can't do much. But the idea of a code is to swap it, is to exchange it for an access token. If you want to take this token and pass it to the authorization server, you wouldn't be able because you don't have the secret. You have to hack into the server to get that secret. So it's halfway there. We are halfway there. So browser history is another kind of attack. And technically, the authorization servers should handle that using all sorts of headers and meta information in this redirect, basically. And of course, you should use a modern browser. The referrer is very dark. I'll put the slide for this. Referrer, the page to which the authorization server redirects back with the code. Don't read this. With the code for now. That page renders a URL. So in the exact page that you land when you come back from Keycloak, in my case, or for Google, there will be a URL in there that if you click, and whenever you click a URL, let me show you that. If I logged into here and I go to, I don't know, let's see if I clear this resource, for example, no, this opened another tab. Let's see here. Click there. If I actually, that would also work. Again, let's do the resource. Come on. Again, here. There. Look at this. This, any request you do, in the request header, there is the referrer, which tells you where you came from, which tells the server where you came from. And imagine the following wild scenario. There is a link in the page that you land after you are redirected back with the code in the URL. And then with this URL in your browser address here at the top, you click on a link. If you click on a link, your code goes along in the referrer header to whatever website you will go to. What the hell? HTTP standard. If you go to a page, you need to tell the page where you came from. Referrer. All right. This is a referrer, and it gets even better. You don't even have to click a link. No. It turns out that if you have an image in that page, the request that the browser does to fetch the image will carry along, just to get the image. The request for the image has this referrer. Let's see if I can actually show that very, very fast. Image, there. The image referrer. This doesn't have. Come on, referrer. I'll see you. Image URL, request header. There you go. So even the request for an image, you don't have to take anything. Huh? It moved away with the right. I got your question, Cosmin. Just a second to finish the idea. So the attack here is to is by mistake. You slip the code to some site, okay? With a referrer or by clicking a link. So as a good practice is to immediately wipe out from the URL the code as soon as you get it. And this is exactly what happened. Let me log in with my application to my application. If I log into localhost 8080, it will get redirected automatically to Keycloak. And if I watch what happens after I log in here, let's log in at user, please, user, sign in. What happens here is that immediately after I got back into, where are you? Or here. So the click I did on keycloak got me back with redirect to the URL this, got me back in 8080. And the immediate next thing that happened is that the URL to 8080 was played, after which immediately my implementation of the client did a 302 redirecting me to this in order to wipe out everything that came after the question mark. Because after that came here the code, you see. So immediately after you receive the code, the client application should redirect again to wipe the code from the URL to prevent it remaining in browser history and to prevent referrer attacks. And this is by default implemented by most client libraries you use to integrate with the authorization servers out there. Mine does it automatically, I don't have to do anything. And the browser history. And there is a solution to that also, is to request the code through a form, not through redirects. If you play forms, posts, forms, those don't get the URL. So basically, what does this mean? It means that the authorization server, this guy over here, when it wants to redirect you back and give you the code, it won't do a 302 redirect, no. But instead, it will reply to the browser with a page that contains a form, which is automatically submitted to the client application. That form would post the code. The code won't move in the address, in the URL, would come to the client application in the body of a request. And that cannot be sniffed, that doesn't remain in history and doesn't appear in the referrer because it's just the payload of a request. This is what I mean here by sending a post instead of a redirect. Like a form post doing automatically the post to the client application back to the redirect URL basically, but without carrying the code in the URL itself. Pretty tricky. So referrer browser history, redirection that will immediately just throw the code to some random hacker controlled website, cross-site or cross-forgery. Code injection. Let's see this one. Code injection. Let me see if I can remember by heart what it is. Let's read the whole story, this one. The attacker obtains an authorization code. You saw several ways. What happens next? The attacker performs a regular OAuth, a hash authorization. Yes. Once the attacker grabs the code, go back to the slide. Once the attacker grabs the code, what happens next? You're not done. You don't have the token yet. You need the token. That's the holy grail. That's it. That's what you want to. So what would the hacker do with the code? It will take the code and just basically forge a request. It's a bit more complicated. Why? Yeah. Just a second. Yes. Yeah. So once you have a code, the hacker, let's draw it in red. The hacker does what? Tries to access the application without a session. The application would fire a redirect to the authorization server to start to log you in, to asking you who the heck are you? Huh? Now, this request should never go through. You pause it here. You use a tool to intercept the redirect and block the redirect. And then what happens? The request from the client app never goes to the authorization server. So what you do, you take the body of that request, you pick the state out of it, and you forge a response back. Basically, you create a curl command that calls back into the client app as a hacker. So what do? You take the state from here. Let's put it in orange. You take the state from here. You put it in your request. For now, this blue thing is not here. This is the solution to the problem we're describing. You take the state from here. You put it there. What else should go? Just the code. You take the code you stole from the victim. You put the code in this curl command, and you fire the curl against the client app. The client app can't tell that the code didn't came from the authorization server. It's no way to do that. There is no way the client application could tell that. It will believe that the code came from the authorization server. Take that code and ship it on the back channel to the authorization server, obtaining under the radar an access token. After you do all that, the client application creates you a session in the name of the user, of the victim, in the name for this code that you stole from someone else. So Alice, somehow you stole this code from Alice via referrer, via browser history, via redirect. I don't care. You stole the code. Okay, as a hacker, you initiate and you access the application that triggers the authorization request. You take the state from there, you copy it in a forged request, you put the code you stole from Alice in here, and you play the request to the client app. The client app will obtain the access token under the radar, and you are logged in as Alice. Game over. Okay, this is like authorization code injection. Let me play the whole story, not to miss anything. The attacker performs the regular authorization process with the legitimate client on his device. The attacker injects the stolen authorization code in the response of the authorization server to the client. Technically, it's even better because what I'm showing you here is a simplified version. In practice, the requests, the response doesn't carry just this. There are headers, stuff. It will basically take the actual response from the authorization server and replace the code that it gave back with something, with the stuff you stole, with the code you stole. All right. The legitimate client sends the stolen code to the authorization server token endpoint, right? Along with the secret, with the thing that it has, with the redirect, whatever. The authorization server cannot distinguish that that's a fake code, and all checks succeed, and the authorization server issues the access token to the client. The attacker has now impersonated the victim. Done. I see one more question, one more idea here. Ankur, how can the research server trust the token? All right. Good question. Very good question. Basically the question is this: once you get the green token in the resource server, how come this trusts in this green thing? So it's about the step 5 that we never talked about much now. There are various ways. One, the most common way, is that the token itself carries a digital signature. Which that the resource server can check with the public key of the authorization server. So there is the public key of the Google, for example, in here, and then using that key you can check the bearer token, that very often is a GVT token carrying a signature. Or there could be a shared secret between the authorization server and the resource server in an intranet setup. And I think there is one more solution, which means that the resource server can contact the authorization server to double check the code, double check the token. There are various strategies. Okay, and let's try the question from Cosmin, if I'm able to handle that. Let's see. You connect SSH to a remote server. You run a command line tool. The tool generates a URL. You copy the URL to your local browser. Basically, you don't need to have a browser on that remote server. Oh, you went far. So you mean what? You mean you want to do all this from a CLI? I think you can, yeah, with curl. I think you can. You can curl the authorization server with this. Why not? You can curl the authorization server because this is public information. I mean, like, nothing secret here. Client ID, directory, scope, state. You generate a random state, you pass it. Response type, you do that, right? But then how do you log in? Wait a second. With a CLI, how can the authorization, basically, you won't be able to run step number 2 in case you don't have, the user has to enter user password. How would you do that? How would you do that in a CLI? A CLI, if you want to log in as a user, how would you log in? What? You want to pass the user password? What, in a header? It's wild. It's doable, but it's a different grant type. It's called a password grant or resource owner, in which you actually send the user password. If you want to impersonate the user, you send the user password, then you get back an access token directly, right? But that's not, no, we don't take the right path. At the end, let's try again this question at the end. coming back on track. So where were we? We talked about how can someone use the code they stole by playing it to the actual client, and the client will just take it and ship it and log you in as the user whose code you stole. All right. Now, what's with the PKCE thingy? What's wrong with that? What's the point with that? The solution to block this, there are multiple solutions. Let's put the most basic that came to my mind when I read this attack. I already thought, wait a second, someone has to store my code. But when they stole the code, I already used it, the victim. I mean, like, imagine, I find the code in the browser history. Okay, but that happened yesterday, or 5 minutes, or 1 hour ago. 1 hour ago, I used the code already. So one simple way to mitigate this is the authorization server to remember the codes it saw and just reject duplicated code, saying, hey, I know this code. It was played again, like one shot. Code should be one shot. So that's a way to fix it. But another way to fix it is it's called Pixie. Pixie is also, I want to share basically with you one more vulnerability. Let's do a bit of structure here in a second, please. Yes, I need to tell you about grant types next. I want to mention implicit flow. And my goal in this remaining 10 minutes is to try to explain you why implicit flow was a bad thing, what vulnerabilities can it have, and then explain a bit Pixie, which is starting to become the best practice in all the flows. So what we discussed until here is code authorization code. Client implicit flow we will tackle in a second. The other types of the other ways to obtain an access token are client credential, in which the client application logs in as itself, as an app. Some people call it the app login. The application logs in as in its own name. So I can have like Facebook itself, not my Facebook account, Facebook itself, do stuff, report stuff to I don't know what authorities. Right? Then you need to log in Facebook application itself with its own identity. You don't impersonate a human in there. The access token is for the application. Resource owner, desktop clients, like for the example I know is from the selling point in Carrefour, my next door shop. They have a machine in which they type stuff like the point of sale, how is that called? And they enter a password. And surprisingly, behind the scenes, there is an OAuth hash happening in here. Well, how? The user password the operator enters goes to the authorization server, which gets back a token. Why? Because that software on there has to call different APIs that are protected with OAuth hash. But it's not normal to manipulate the user password in there. That works because it's an embedded machine. You need to hack into that hardware. You need to steal the point of sale. To hack, I don't know, it's hard to believe. It's an embedded system. Assertion flow to integrate with SAML or more legacy, and device code, in which you log in with your Google account on the TV. How is that possible? The TV will show you a code, or maybe the code you see on the web. Basically, the idea is that you will enter your user password not on the TV. The TV, I would never enter my username, my Google username and password on a TV, for Christ's sake. So what do I do instead? I log in with my dear beloved browser, right? And logged in as that, logged in as me on Google. I get to some page that gives me a number, a code, and then the TV asks for that code. That code is the authorization code that I get on a secure browser, and I enter with the remote control on the TV. And the TV, using my authorization code, can continue the flow and play this part for itself. But the code I manually enter, there is no redirect happening in there. This maybe solves Cosmin's question, I'm not sure. But there is a code obtained through a browser that I enter them. So what you can do with your CLI over there, Cosmin, is that you can take the code from the browser and type it in a curl that you send to the client app. That could work. So you log in with your credentials in some VPN, you get the code, take the code from there, SSH, curl with the code, and you let the client server, the client application, use that code you got from the browser and play the rest of the flow under the hood. I think that's what you want to go to, right? Very fun. Now, there is one more mystery here left. What the heck is the implicit flow? It's a wild idea that was originally in the OAuth hash standard 10 years ago, that there can be an application front-end only. What do you mean? No backend. Freedom. JavaScript forever. Meaning that a single page, like an Angular app that doesn't have any backend at all. That's called the public client. They cannot keep a secret. And several problems you face. Since there is no back channel, there is no point of having a back channel because there is no secret. And the flow goes like this. The browser will just send the authorization request. The user will enter the user password or use the single sign-on session they have active already. And the response already carries back the token. Carries back the token. There is no more communication down there. Then the single page app takes the token and plays it to whatever resource they want to access. Now, note here the hash. There is no query param anymore. Why? Because you want to grant the access, the ability to wipe this out from the URL once it gets it. You can change the anchor, but you cannot change the URL. If there were a question mark, you can't just delete it once you got it. So the app itself, I had an example prepared, but who can do everything? Come on, really now. 8081. Time is so short today. SPA app. Oops. Let's see if I can rapidly put it to work. CDN, right? So I have a stupid application, Spring Boot, that just terminal. All right. Kill port, my tool, 8081, died. Good, try again. So let's see. Maybe I'm very lucky and I can show you already. Come on, what am I missing? SPA HTML. Oh damn. It's called Kiklo here. There. Oh, not possible. But this was a. I have a bug. I know the bug. I just late minute changes here. This would log in. There is no backend for this JavaScript file. So there was this idea in the OAuth hash at the beginning that an application can, a JavaScript only application can log in by itself. But that came with some problems. The access token would be directly returned from in the browser. And that makes it vulnerable. Why? Because the attacks that the implicit flow was prone to were maybe having libraries that you use, JavaScript libraries, that would somehow find your access token in the Java. This is called cross-site scripting, basically, but not from some malicious injected JavaScript snippet, but by a very library that is not trustworthy and starts doing shitty things and sniffs your access tokens and sends them to anyone else. So any lib in here, since the access token is kept in a var somewhere in JavaScript, can if they find that token, can just send it somewhere else with a fetch, sending your access token to a hacker. And then the hacker can impersonate you. There is no way someone could tell it's not the proper. So the moment access token goes in the browser, you're on the risk of losing it by bad, stupid, evil libraries, cross-site scripting, or even, again, browser history that remembers this thing. So implicit flow died. They deprecated it several years ago. Also, refresh tokens are dubious. Should you keep them or not? And the discussion is very fun, but again, complicated. The idea is that once you have a single page app, there is an option there. Do you want to bring tokens in the JavaScript, in the browser, or would you rather use cookies? like we use for the past 30, 40 years. Cookies are battle proven, are super safe, and are immune to cross-site scripting or libraries. If it's a HTTP only cookie that cannot be accessed from JavaScript, then you're super safe. But that would require that some server keeps track of you. That would require a backend. And those guys here didn't have a backend. Right. I want just to explain Pixie once. I know I'm running out of time. 5 more minutes, as usual. Pixie is the addition to the authorization code that can enable, again, single-page applications to be safe to use. The discussion, again, 2 more. Let's see what Pixie means. I will try to first explain it in the diagram and then move on to the slides to summarize again. Pixie. With all this madness, there is one more step added. At the beginning of the authorization flow, the client app generates a random and then hashes that random. Hashes the random VVV, V stands from verifier, hashes the random, that verifier, and sends the hash in the first request. So again, the key point here is that a hash moves from the client to the authorization server. The authorization server remembers that hash, and in the, how to put it, there are 2 important things here. The random number, called the verifier, and the hash, which is derived from the verifier. Now, the client app in the first request over here sends the hash to the authorization server, which keeps track of it. In the token request, the client app will play the verifier in the body, in the body. The verifier gets to the server, which has to check that the hash of the verifier it just received matches the hash it remembered from the origin of this flow. If they match, it means what? It means that the first request and the second request, they came from the same party, from the same place. You can't do any trick of blocking this request, replacing some code. You can't do that anymore. You can't do that anymore because you cannot, you don't have, you cannot fake a request like this anymore. Once an authorization flow starts, the code verifier, which is a random number, is kept on the client app. And that code verifier, you can't breach it, you can't steal it. So if you see that in transit, you cannot possibly create another hash in the, this has to do with the non-reversibility of the hashing function. You can never determine the original verifier if you just sniff the challenge. You cannot retrieve the original data based just solely on the hash. So technically, you cannot, when the server over here receives the request, it is sure that the client app is the one who sends the first and the second request. It links together the two. Explaining it in a slide. To actually pinpoint to a clear, can I? Let's see. Request. If I paste the code in a sniffed, I'm trying to explain you give you an example. Let's imagine I stole the code. If I stole the code, I will try to forge then a call to client app, faking it comes from here. Okay, it works. Yes, look. Let me show you how this protects you against someone stealing your code. If someone steals your code, what would they do? They will try again to initiate a new session with the client app. They will get redirected to the authorization server with this request. So they have this. Okay, then they would stop this request from going further and forge a response to that request. In that forged response, they would put the code they picked. Okay, now the code, this forged request pretending to come from the authorization server will go to the client app. The code here will go to the client app, which will play the code to the server. But bad luck, because the request that was just intercepted and stopped, contained a challenge for a verifier, which the client app sends next with the stolen code. But the stolen code here was not the one issued by the server, was replaced by the stolen one. So the code coming from another authorization flow, from another authorization discussion, would not match the code challenge remembered from the previous interaction. So in short, the authorization server can say, who the hell are you? I mean, this code I did not issue for you. This code I did not issue for you. Where did you get it? It is able to detect that you're trying to fake, you're trying to inject an authorization code into the client app. It's really tricky. You need to think it 3 more times probably. It took me a while, quite some hours, to get this hole in my So Pixie, the client will generate a random number, hash it, and send the hash. The server remembers the response with the code, but stores the code challenge, the hash. The client takes the code and ships it with in the back channel with the code verifier, and the server can then will take the challenge, remembers the challenge from before, takes the code verifier it just receives via the back channel, hashes it, and sees whether this code challenge matches the code challenge that it remembered from before. If they do, it means that the server talks to the same client. We are talking about the same initiator, the same code exchange interaction. Yeah, this is tough. I know. This is very tough. So I think it's time for questions now. I'm out of time, so let's focus on that. Let's see where we. Oh, type. Oops, not type. I will copy this in plain sight here. Hacker perspective. Remote server. A secure shared login trying to intercept token. What? Access lists along net list that what? That machine learning generated, artificial intelligence written. Yeah, the TV stuff is the same. Uncle. Well, how about the case if we have one front end Angular and one server app microservice? Then this server app does the work for both the client app and the resource server. Yes, indeed. The server app, up until here, agree. The server app has many instances. Ooh. One instance will create a GVT token and sends to browser. Wait a second. The server app is not the authorization server. The server app is the resource server, is the application containing logic. It's not the ones creating GVT tokens. That's the authorization server. That's Keycloak or Azure or something. It's not your microservice. A microservice doesn't generate tokens. I mean, like, no, doesn't generate tokens. The next request gets the next instance. I see what problem you want to raise, but it's not that case. If you want to use the hash in this case, you have to have an authorization server, period. And the authorization server is an instance that generates tokens. Now, let's come back to the super basics here. Where were we? Second, scrolling to slides here. Still searching. Yes. So the authorization server will issue the token. That token from here might get to the Angular application. Might get here. But then the Angular application will play the same token to multiple resource servers. And now let's play the idea. What if there are multiple instances of the resource of the microservice you have? They will all receive the same token. Not a problem. Not a problem. They will receive the token, all of them, the same token. Basically, every request the Angular makes to the backend has to carry the token along to authorize the request. So not a problem. Not a problem. We have here, there's no problem multiple instances receiving the same token. It will be valid for all. Okay. Isn't there a header I can set on the server serving my SPA, which specifies, wait a second, what specifies which servers the SPA is allowed to do? Yes, that is called the confused deputy problem. It had, it's called, okay, so a token, an access token, can have an audience. Why am I typing this? I should point you to the best practices about the hash. Audience. Something with audience. Audience restricted access token. There you go. This is what you want. Audience restricted access tokens. They can be played only to some APIs. They are not playable to any API. And there are a series of solutions over here. Pretty advanced, if you ask me. But this is what you need. This is what you need. The authorization server would grant tokens that can be used only to open some APIs. This solution can be, in the last episode, I actually discussed how we can do that with Keycloak, with resource access. And the application would check whether the token contains the right to access a certain application, a certain resource server, as we call it. So it's doable, 100% doable, of course. Good. How about the case if we have one front-end Angular and one server app, microservice, then the server app does the work of both client app and resource. Yes, we answer that, and it's perfectly doable. If there are more questions, please put them in any channels you know, and the Pentral team will forward them to me. So I promise to share with you the resources of this edition. There are two documents over here. One is the threat model, a bit boring if you ask, and the second one is very, very nice, very good read, although hardcore, but very good read, that I just showed you. Very good read with best practices. So if you ever have to do with OAuth hash and you start configuring authorization servers or clients or having an in-house build of OAuth hash client or server, God forbid, then you need to read that document. Technically, anyone in security having anything to do with security should read that document from scratch, from top to bottom. All right. I think that's kind of it. There were some more tricks in there, but let's keep it to 1 hour. All right. So thank you all for this second episode, and yeah, have a lovely spring. Not necessarily framework, but a lovely spring. Good. Cheers, man. Let's see you next time. Bye-bye.